I started a little bit after Philip did in 2012. I would have started in 2004, but I was 8 at the time. So.
What? Come on, get with it, Scott.
I know.
I'm not sure that's an excuse, sir.
Yeah,
You like?
I know. I should have seen the housing market. I don't know. I was too busy investing at the time.
All his lemonade stand money.
Yeah.
Hello folks, and welcome to Author Adjacent, a show about the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author. I'm your host, Michael Vadney, author of Crownfall, a noble dark fantasy. But today we're doing something a little bit different. Normally we do these bite-sized segments or individual interviews, but today I have 3 wonderful guests as we are going to be discussing, writing, and planning a series. First, let's go around the horn, get everybody introduced to the show. Nicholas, why don't you start us off?
Hello, thank you for having me, Michael. I'm Nicholas W. Fuller. I'm a writer and a author, interviewer, kind of similar to Michael. Kind of also early in the career, similar to Michael. I've got this lovely book here called Shattered that you can purchase. And this is related to a series that I'm writing. It's kind of a prequel novella. I think the best place for it is a book 1.5. And the book 1 I'm actually serializing on my Patreon. But it's planned to be a trilogy, and I keep working in like other little stories too. Got a short story for an antho that's related. But yeah, I also have a couple trunk books that were both one-offs. So I'm kind of, I'm looking forward to talking about that versus planning the series.
Nice. Philip, why don't you go next?
Okay, yeah. Well, first of all, Michael, thank you for inviting me here. It's been a pleasure to chat with you in the past, and I'm excited to be here with Nicholas and Scott and have this conversation. So I am a booktuber, I guess is what they call it, which I know I went on the internet and I started a YouTube channel where I could talk about fantasy books. So that makes me a booktuber. But I've been writing a lot longer than I've been booktubing. I started writing my fantasy series in 2004, actually. And it took about 2 decades before I went ahead and published it. So it's called the Adan Trilogy. And all 3 books are out in the trilogy as physical books, ebooks, and audiobooks. And also the first book is actually out as a special edition by The Broken Binding. So there's that. Hopefully book 2 is coming out this year as well. I'm told the art for it is coming out, or it's going to begin in the summer. So I'm excited about that. And then I have a little sequel called Wild Darkness Gathers that takes place about 16 years after the trilogy. So, and I'm currently working on a prequel.
Nice. It is great to have you back. I'm actually in the last 45 minutes of the audiobook for The Prophet of Adan. I'll probably finish it tonight. I'm very excited too.
Yeah, well, thank you for giving it a listen. Yeah.
Of course. And rounding us off, Scott.
Yeah. Okay, so my name is Scott Killian Love, and I recently published my debut novel, which is a part of a trilogy, The Sound of Silver Strings, and this is book 1, Blood on Blank Pages. So I've been writing this book. I started a little bit after Philip did in 2012. I would have started in 2004, but I was 8 at the time. So.
What? Come on, get with it, Scott.
I know.
I'm not sure that's an excuse, sir.
Yeah.
You like?
I know. I should have seen the housing market. I don't know. I was too busy investing at the time.
All his lemonade stand money.
Yeah. That's me. I'm also I'm from Tulsa, and I'm also an attorney. So I actually published my book while I was waiting on my bar results. So I am both a very new attorney and a very new author, which is why I don't have the bookshelves as my background yet. But I'm gonna get there.
That's all right. You will get and join us eventually. It took me like 2 years of doing this show before I finally put books behind me.
Is Blood on Blank Pages also the name of your law firm? Or,
yes.
no?
Yeah. It's BOBP law.
There you go.
It's a firm called Star Beginning King. It's a trial firm in Tulsa.
All right, folks, let's dive right into it then. And I think we're going to start our first question. I'm going to go to Nicholas again on this one. So when you started writing your series, how much did you map out beforehand before you got to that first page?
I don't want to start without having some thoughts on the end, you know? I didn't super plot everything out very clearly, but I plotted all of book 1, and I had like ideas for book 2 and book 3 that were at least like a couple pages, you know? So I wanted to have a clear understanding of where I wanted to go before I started moving. And I'm a big plotter anyway, so that just felt natural. But then also, like, I have the planned trilogy, but I do have in mind, like, if you know, there's good reception, I have thoughts of like different places I could take it to, you know? So yeah, I definitely wasn't going to get started. But honestly, like, when I was starting to think about it, like, it didn't feel too hard to think like more broadly, you know? It felt like, yeah, okay, we could do this, and then we can do this, and then we can do this, and like, and that feels good. That's the fun part, you know? So
Yeah, I will agree. As a big outliner, I also think that's the fun part. Scott, how much did you plan before you started writing your series?
Oh man. Well, okay, so it took me 14 years to do the whole thing, but I wrote out my entire trilogy, first draft, all the way through, with no outline at all. And when I was finished, it was awful. It was just the worst, and so I deleted the whole thing. And so I'm so happy to be part of this, because I'm here solely as a cautionary tale on what not to do. So it wasn't until, I want to say, 2018 that I was like, I should probably start outlining some of this stuff. And I had the whole idea of what I wanted to do and my inspirations, but I was definitely learning to write as I was writing it, and as I was discovering new things about writing, I was realizing that I was not doing those things before. So I still have my outline, and once I got like the main points, I realized that you could you have like these moments in like these certain points that those have to happen, and those, like, the outline has to reflect that, but you can also do these little deviations that kind of give it a different tone or emotion. And the side thing is that you don't get bored writing it, because sometimes, I don't know if you guys have written out an outline that was so detailed that you like God, I'm so bored actually writing this sentence down, because I've already done it and I know exactly what the next sentence is going to be. So I didn't want to do that either. So now on my second book, my outlines are very like, this is just some stuff that needs to happen in this chapter, and then we'll move on, and it gives me a lot more room to kind of figure out what I want to do as I'm writing it, while still being interested in the story I'm trying to tell. So
Nice. It sounds like you did the Waititi.
Yeah.
Waititi? I don't know how to say the director's name, but he throws out his manuscripts. Yeah. He'll write his whole movie, and then he throws it out and rewrites it from memory, and whatever he keeps, that's the good parts.
Yeah. No, that is I have thrown out probably more words than most people who have a debut novel, because I've thrown out 2 whole books, and they were not short books either. So it was that's why it took me 14 years. So don't suggest it.
I've heard of that approach before, though. Like, write the whole thing, throw it out, and like write it again, because you'll keep the good parts, which sounds great in theory, but also very painful, you know. Like, but I was just gonna like say that I've done the exact same thing, Scott. I've like plotted the fun out of the process, and I'm like, let's not do that again. Yeah, let's keep things a little bit loose so that there's room for a little bit of discovery and keep the fun there.
Philip, what about yourself? How much did you have planned before you started the Adan trilogy?
Well, first I want to commiserate with Scott and Nicholas, because I think we're all learning as we do this. I certainly would not want anyone to see my first draft of my first book. I'm pretty sure I've deleted that anyway. Hopefully it's gone forever. But we learn as we go, that's for sure. And that said, I'm definitely probably the biggest planner here, I think, from what I'm hearing. First thing I did is I drew a map. I had to have a map. So I drew a map, and this one has been, this is not the one I drew. This has been made very nice by Jack Shepard, who is just a wonderful person in our community who makes a living making cool maps for fantasy authors. But I drew the map, and then I did a lot of world building because I wanted to do that, and it was fun. I just had a blast creating a mythology and a history, and wrote pages and pages about this world, and I had to do that. I wanted to do that, and languages, at least I didn't do a Tolkien and actually invent languages, but I did enough to fake it pretty well. So
you fake it really well. I thought you did when I read your first book, The Way of Eden, and there was so much like language in there. I was like, I think he wrote this out. So you faked it really well.
Thank you. Yeah, my day job is I'm a medievalist, so I love Old English and Old Norse and dead languages in general. So I do love languages. So that was a fun part of the process for me. But so then I did make an outline of the trilogy as well. And I had a pretty good idea of where things were going from beginning to end. And I knew a lot in terms of the big beats, the main beats of the story. I did have to flesh out a lot in the middle. And I totally agree with my friends here, because it's really something when you get to a point in the creative process where the story speaks to you. And I think all of us are probably similarly crazy this way. But when you're in the zone and when you're creating, it feels like the story is speaking to you. And when the story speaks to you and tells you, okay, you thought you were going here, but actually you need to go over here. You have to listen to the story. And so that's what I did, fortunately. And I think that creative process that's just bubbling and everything inside you, that makes the story so much better, so much more interesting. And you go places you don't expect. And you have to be prepared for that, to embrace that. Even if you're a big planner like me, sometimes you got to go a little crazy.
Yeah, outlining is definitely just the best plan you have at the time. It is always able to change. It's not written in stone. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
Once you deviate from your outline, because you said you're like the most outliner ever, when you find yourself deviating, do you go back and change your outline? Because that's my biggest problem, is like my outline gets thrown out a quarter of the way through the book, and now I'm like, do I go back? So.
The short answer is yes. And I'm going to give an example. I think Michael's got a question about for later, but the short answer is yes, because when you do make that change, sometimes it causes a chain reaction. And you have to then go back to the outline and say, oh, wait, that means I have to change this scene later on, or that kind of thing. So usually it entails some, scratching out of things and saying, okay, we're going to adjust this. Nothing too major usually, but it can cause some chain reaction there. So, yeah.
Yeah, it really depends on how big that deviation is. And yep. I do think I have a question on that at some point. I'm not sure which one we're referring to, but we'll get there. No, you're doing great, man. No worries. But something that I did want to ask everybody here is, so when you're writing a series, you have to make sure that each individual book is a satisfying story on its own that also connects the overarching story of your series. How do you make sure to maintain that balance when planning or writing your series? Why don't we start, Scott, on this one?
Okay, I've got opinions on this one. So the way that I now have figured out how to do it, and I literally, this was my last draft. I've written this book 6 times. So on my last draft, I did it in a year because I figured out this method. And it's basically, each book has to have its own problem, its own conflict in it. While also, and then there needs to be like a secondary or even tertiary, depending on how many books you have, overarching problem that you need to have that in book one. There needs to be something that you're going to tell your reader, hey, once this thing is concluded, that's how you know the series is over, right? I could show you the ending scene that's like in the beginning book, and at the end you'll be like, that was the ending scene of your last book, and I don't care how many books are in between. And then you need to have another moment, another conflict that's related but not exactly the same, that when you see that scene conclude finally, and I tell you that that's the conclusion, you'll say, oh, that's the end of your first one. So each one you need to think of like there's the initial conflict, that's your overarching conflict, and then you need to have a conflict that is related but not totally in your other book. And then you also have to treat it like the 3 acts. Like if you're doing 3 books, each book is an act. So my first book is act 1. And so if you were, let's say I published this trilogy all at once, the last page of my book needs to be where most people would expect the ending of the act 1 to start. So like when the heroes finally are like, okay, this is the adventure that we're on. We've had all this build up and we've had the call to action. We've introduced characters. We've introduced conflict. Now we're really on this adventure. That should be where the end of book 1 starts, is when you like start on the adventure. And then the end of book 2 needs to be what the end of act 2 would be, which is like, oh, now we understand why it's really hard. And then that third book is going to be the end game of like the characters finally, they've learned something from the other 2 acts, and now that's the final push towards, the villain or the problem or the conflict or whatever it is. And then that's how it has to flow, just on a very high up level.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm personally a very big fan of the 3-act structure. If it was good enough for Aristotle, it's good enough for me. Philip, what about you in writing your series?
Well, I think Scott said it really well, actually. It's important to give your reader some sense of resolution at the end of the book. I'm not a big fan of total cliffhanger there at the end. And sometimes you just have to have that, and that's fine, I suppose. But it's good if you can give your reader some sense of resolution, even if it's a trilogy or a series or what have you. But I also, in terms of my own writing, thought of it in kind of hero's journey, sort of Joseph Campbell kind of terms, where the first book for me was all about the departure, the protagonist leaving that comfortable womb-like space, being shoved out into the world and having to, wrestle with a lot of things. And so introducing the conflict, everything else, and up to a kind of a boiling point. And then the second book for me was all about transcendence, where the hero has to become something else in order to save the day, or make some great sacrifice, or whatever it might be. And we all love our fantasy tropes, so you get the idea. But some kind of transcendence takes place. And then the return, which is something that I think is not done a lot in modern fantasy, where the big battle is won, and then you don't really see a lot of the post big battle stuff. Then what? It's just a celebration over. But in reality, I think a lot of times when you have such a big conflict, there have to be repercussions, right? And what about the protagonist coming home? What do they bring then, if they're alive at the end of it all? What's the fallout? So I thought about that, and that's kind of a weird third book in the sense that you're about to find out, Michael, that my second book is probably going to feel like the end, where a lot of people would end a trilogy or a series. So that third book, in my case, was something I deliberately wanted to do a little differently. But I hope, and Scott was talking about that, in each case, I've given the reader a sense of, this is a good stopping point. If you want to read something else, you can, and then come back to the next book. So that was a goal, definitely. But at the same time, as Scott was saying, you got to have some big thing happening that links it all together. There's got to be that conflict, that thing that's going on that isn't resolved until the very end. And that's where you give your reader the the biggest resolution is at the end of it all.
After hearing that, I am very interested to see what happens in the third book of The Way of Adan, because right now, like, I'm literally, the climax is happening, and I'm like, okay, we're concluding a lot of things here. What's going to happen next? So we'll definitely see. I'm very excited to get into that. Nicholas, what about yourself? How do you keep the stories satisfying on their own, but good together as well?
Yeah, well, just building on what both of these gentlemen have said, I think, the 3-act structure is a great place to start. I think that, like a first book kind of can focus on introductions, but you need some kind of, conflict there, of course, and a little bit of conflict resolution. I kind of think about it sometimes as like a video game structure where you need to have like a mini boss, and then you're getting to the final boss, at the end. But the other thing that I've kind of had in mind is a little bit thinking about sort of the dynamics and the growth and the conflicts of sort of side characters along the way with some of the earlier books. The bigger character arc is the main character that I'm working with. And, in the beginning of my book Stranded that I'm serializing, like, my main character is way kind of a broken man, and over the course of like the trilogy, he's going to be built up and built up. But the first book kind of is focusing on some side characters, a little bit of found family. The second book I have in mind, someone that we find out is a bit of a villain at the end of book 1 is going to have a big redemption arc. So little spoiler there, but like that's something that I'm really am looking forward to playing with, and think that'll be a fun way to make the book 2 interesting and exciting without because and that character's arc is going to be the focus of book 2, but not as important in book 3. Book 3, it's going to be very back to that main character. So just kind of playing with these different characters and what's going on with them, and like kind of shining a light a little bit more on some of the stuff, but always through the lens of the main character for mine. That seems like a fun way to build the whole story.
Yeah, you can't forget side characters and all the subplots.
I was a little bit confused. Did you say you start with your main character, or do you start with your side characters? Like, when you're writing, or do you write kind of scene by scene, or is it there a certain character that you're following?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of, as I'm writing, I'm kind of doing scene by scene. But like in this book 1, my main character is sort of starting. We learn that he's lost a lot and he's a little bit of a broken man, but he very quickly finds some new friends and builds a found family, and that found family kind of becomes a lot of the focus of that book 1.
We have these series, we have tons of characters. We have our side characters, our main characters, the details, the timeline, the world building, the magic systems. How do you keep track of all of these things to make sure that you maintain continuity through your series? I'll actually throw this one right back at you, Nicholas.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think anyone has any idea.
Right? I don't have a great. I mean, I definitely have sheets, different spreadsheets and different documents and whatnot. I wish, I could somehow be a little bit cleaner about it all. But there's definitely still sometimes, especially like over the course of spending, years on these ideas, like things kind of change a little. I will say a good editor is worth their weight in gold because they can help you find the things that you missed where you're like, oh yeah, I made that change, didn't I? So that's super helpful. I think, as much as you can kind of, I think it's a bit of a balancing act because you want to document along the way and keep track of these things, but also you don't necessarily, can you spend your entire life world building on something and not actually write the book? You certainly can, and that's not necessarily where I want to be. But I think spending some time trying to keep some notes and keep it together is good. And then, kind of keeping that flow, like Dr. Philip Chase was talking about, when that story is speaking to you, you let it kind of speak to you. It's good to have those guideposts, that plot in mind, but, and I used to think that was kind of mumbo jumbo because I was such a plotter, and I'm like, nah, man, like if it's like going off the rails, I think that's maybe a lack of mastery of the craft. But now I think the guy that thought that is like, he's wrong. He's very, very wrong. You're like, now it's, you get to a point when you're in that flow and you're working with it, and it's just like you get new ideas and you're like, wait, this idea is better. I need to go pursue this better idea, and it's more interesting and it's more organic. Let's go run with it. And sometimes that's a complete abandonment of some stuff, but sometimes you're like, wait a minute, no, that story that I wanted to tell, I do need to kind of bring it back a little bit, I remember hearing from another author, I think Ryan Cahill, was saying that he had written at one point killing one character, and then he's like, wait a minute, no. I need to bring this character back, because if I don't, my main is going to have this Anakin Skywalker slide to the dark side. I need to make sure that that character is there to rein him in, you know? And I was like, okay, yeah, it's all a balance, and there's no kind of, better way of learning than doing.
And you're kind of fooling yourself if you think that you've like figured it all out in that one sitting where you did the outline as well.
Yeah.
You know?
That is a good thing to keep in mind. Like, it is a little bit arrogant to think you solved all the problems before you started writing the book.
Yeah, like that you've had every idea that's going to involve that book. It's ridiculous. I came up with my best ideas like 3 years ago. 90% of what's in my book are the ideas I came up with 3 years ago, not what I came up with in 2012. So
nice. Well, Scott, what about yourself? How do you keep track of the continuity of all the details that you decided while carrying on into your second book?
So for me, my magic is fairly simple. I did the Stormlight Archive and the Song of Ice and Fire guideline, which is like, you know how they have 7 books, 7 gods, 7 kingdoms, or it's 10, 10, 10. Well, mine's 3, 3, 3. So I've got 3 gods, and then, the gods are here on the cover. They're going to be on every cover. And then one of the types of magic is always on the cover, always in the title. Excuse me. So I've got blood, fire, shadow. It's basically fire and shadow, and then the blood is how you get to do either thing. So the magic was fairly simple, but the political situation was the real one that I struggled with the most, because I am telling a political fantasy. And so trying to make all that, remember all the families and all the different relationships, because I wanted it to reflect that kind of medieval aristocracy vibe with a little bit of Roman Republic sprinkled in there as well. So that was the real, remembering the relationships. And what I did to keep it all together was I had a list of here are my high houses, and those are all the lords of the different dominions. And then I had, here are my patrician houses, and those are all the lords of that one city that the empire is ruled from. And so then you just make everyone related in some form or fashion, and you make it dramatic because this region hates this region, but they're also intermarried, so there you go. And you just really try to make sure that your plot keeps moving through that. Get the plot down, and then make everything else support that plot. And the continuity, it's strange how it'll kind of fall into place.
I do like the idea of picking a number and just being all right, we're just going to be consistent with this here. It also adds kind of a divine consistency to your world, which is very interesting.
Yeah. It's there's a lot of stuff that's based on 3 and 9, because I like the 9 Lord of the Rings Fellowship. That was always important to me. So a lot of 3s and 9s, and then 3 times 3. So that just helps me keep everything okay, we're doing it in 3s. It's just the rules help you. People think they hurt, but rules actually, they help.
I couldn't agree more as a plotter and all that. Philip, what about yourself? How did you maintain consistency through your world building and your magic system through your series?
Well, a couple things. One thing I want to reiterate that Nicholas said is a good developmental editor can be a really big help. And I certainly had I have a lot of gratitude toward my developmental editor, AP Canavan, for pointing out inconsistencies and things that I hadn't really thought deeply about. And so I got a lot from those interactions. And I think he helped me make it a better book for sure. In terms of, I'd like to address one kind of consistency that we haven't talked about yet. And that's linguistic in nature. Here I am talking about languages again, because I think, for me anyway, what I wanted to do was to give each of the kingdoms and the regions and the cultures a kind of linguistic consistency, not just throw cool names like spaghetti at the wall, but actually have a kind of linguistic consistency in my naming. And I was helped in that by drawing from real world languages, dead languages like, Old English or Old Norse or whatever. I know some Welsh, so I used that in a certain region that had a more Celtic vibe to it. I've lived in South Asia, so I have some cultures there with languages that reflect, a kind of a Sanskrit-derived, tone or whatever. And I just wanted it to feel consistent, that, the names would make sense. The place names and the personal names would fit within that cultural vibe that I'm going for. So that was one way that I tried to maintain consistency within the world building.
That's actually really important to think about, the consistency of naming, not just of people, but of places across your cultures. It makes me think very much of like the Wheel of Time, which has a lot of that, and the Lord of the Rings, which has a lot of that, very consistent areas.
The linguistic thing, for what I did was I realized that, Big Daddy Tolkien, he did the linguistic thing because that's what he loved. And then you have George R. R. Martin, who he loved heraldry, and so that's like what he went into. I love history, and so that's what I wanted to go into. But like keeping the language part, another part of what was I trying to say? Doing the language. Oh, come on, Scott. It was a good point. It was what Philip was. Oh yeah, the linguistic consistency. It also goes into your map. Like, why do these people speak different languages? Like, sometimes I feel like, we just have our little maps and then we just do like a cross in between. Like, okay, so if you're in the northwestern quadrant, then you speak this language is entirely different. But no. How do they interact with each other? Like, in my book, I've got a huge mountain range in between the kind of the more Roman type people and then the more Norse type people. And so they, the people in the north, they speak, I just did Danish because I wasn't trying to do what Philip did and like have the made up language. I was like, man, I could spend a million years doing that. So I just have them speak Danish, and then the people in the south, they speak English. So, but then, there's like this other section over here in the west where like the Norse people did come down and conquer it for a little bit, but then the people in the south, they conquered it. So now there's like a nice mixture of culture there. And so this one guy, he's a character, his name is Micah Veranius, which is like both a northern first name but a family more Roman name. So like always trying to think about like, okay, these are separate languages, and so we can kind of separate them that way, but then also how do they mix with one another?
No, that's
sorry,
really
that's what I was
point.
trying to say the whole time, and it just took me a while to get there.
And get there you did. Good job.
Kind of, if I can build on that just a little bit too.
Please do.
I've thought about kind of different cultures for naming conventions too, but also kind of thinking about linguistic consistency. I sort of think about that on the character level also. So like I like to have characters that have different speaking styles than other characters. So in particular, like I think of like, I try to find something to kind of make a model or example for that speaking. So a good kind of example of that. I have one character in Stranded, the one that I'm serializing on Patreon, it's a kind of, there's a split personality AI in the main character's head. And one of them is unhinged, and he's kind of modeled after, if you ever seen the Reebok commercial for Terry Tate Office Linebacker, go look it up sometime. It's unhinged, and like I'm like, this is gonna be fun, So every time like I write that guy's that crazy AI's like dialogue, which is just spoken in the main character's head, I'm like, okay, what would Terry Tate say? And he'd be like, whoa, yeah, let's go, And I'm like, okay, perfect. That's the energy I need for this character. But no other character is like that, So, but it adds some flavor, I think, and I'm really enjoying writing it,
Yeah, there's so much you can draw from with like history, real life people, real life cultures to pull into our second world fantasy and sci-fi stories. A lot of great inspiration. So, as you guys have been writing your series or planning your series, I know all of us have really said at different levels that we are plotters. Have you had a character surprise you mid-series where they suddenly became more or much less important than you had originally planned them to be? Scott, I'll start with you on this one.
Oh yeah, 100%. Writing it out is discovering who's important and who's not. I've always stuck with my same 5. They've all been around for a long time, but the people that surround them, it usually starts out pretty mechanical. I need a character to be this guy's bodyguard because he's a lord and he's gonna have a bodyguard, and so he has little scenes. But then then you kind of, okay, well, what's his deal? Well, actually, they're best friends. No, actually, they're cousins, and actually, he might be, because my lord doesn't have any children, so he might be the heir. Well, what happens if this guy dies? Well, shoot, he might be the guy in charge. Oh, but what if he gets captured? What if he's ransomed? Well, now, like all these little things, like develop as you're writing it. But I would say, man, the biggest character that I can't believe that he's barely in my book anymore. He was like a main perspective character. He was like the Ned Stark character, and he's still in there, but he just didn't have anything interesting to say after a long time of writing him. I was like, he's just kind of another guy. And yeah, so my advice on all that would be to make sure that if you're gonna be following a character, the more pages you give that character, the more unique and interesting things he needs to either say about the world or have the world say to him. And if you can't figure that out, cut him, get him out. Fantasy, it's already too many characters,
Ned Stark didn't have a whole lot to say after book 1 either. So.
No, yeah. Yeah.
That is very valid. Philip, we've talked about this a little bit before. I think you had a surprise character become very important later in your series. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah, happy to. So in war, you have, of course, the two sides of a conflict, and sometimes more than two sides. But what often happens and doesn't get nearly, I think, enough attention is what happens to the ordinary people who are caught in the middle. And I wanted to have a character in that third book where we're talking again about the repercussions of all that's happened. I wanted to have a character to represent that. And so I had this 13-year-old, I think she starts as 13-year-old girl, and named Saren. And it quickly became apparent. It was almost like she took me by the shirt and said, "Listen, buddy, this is where we're going now here with this story. You hadn't planned this, but..." And she became just much more important, to the point where a lot of people who get to the end of the trilogy will tell me, this is my favorite character of the entire trilogy. And you introduced her in the third book. And I'm like, yep, well, she just sort of rampaged into the story in her own way. And kind of, she really spoke to me as I was writing this character for whatever reason. And so, yeah, for sure, I would say that Saren is my example of this, where she became, for me, very endearing. And I love it when readers connect with her. And I feel like she ended up playing a much bigger role, but a role that I didn't even realize when I started how much I needed to explore what she represented and her journey. So, yeah, she's definitely my example.
I'm looking forward to meeting her. I now have a sneaking suspicion that she was introduced in book 2, but I'll find out soon.
It's complicated, but yeah.
All right, we'll see then. Nicholas, what about yourself? As you were writing Stranded and you had Shattered, is there any character that became more or less important that really surprised you?
I think Scott and Philip have already, said pretty much everything there is to say on this, but yeah, I mean, as I developed Stranded more, more characters became more involved. And I started writing Stranded before I wrote Shattered, even though Shattered's out and Stranded's not fully out yet. But so then taking some characters that I'd started developing and then leaving them, mixing them all around is really fun. And again, to the point I was making earlier, I think if you're spending enough time writing, you are going to get to that point where a character sort of surprises you and takes you and brings you on this journey that you weren't necessarily planning. And I think maybe part of the reason why is because we sort of plan these books sort of with our own kind of lens, but then eventually we build these characters that have a different sort of worldview and a different viewpoint on the events that we have planned. And when we kind of get into that, then we're like, oh, this is actually very interesting, you know? And when we start exploring with that, that's when we get to the place where, wait a minute, this voice is more exciting than this one that I thought I was going to. Forget that one. That one was sort of just a guy that didn't have anything unique to say, but I want to explore these other ones, like a 13-year-old girl that, you know, obviously Dr. Philip Chase is not a 13-year-old girl, you know? Like,
No,
yeah,
not.
right.
Last time I checked, he was not.
Right? Yeah. No, the beard's a giveaway, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
It does help that I have daughters, though. So
Well, yeah. There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Lots of first-hand experience. I will actually throw this one right back to you, Nicholas, then. So what is something you established really early on in your series that is you now foresee or have ran into, this is going to be a problem that I have to write around?
So far, knock on wood, there's not like major problems, but there's smaller things where I'm like, I want to change that. So, you know, I mentioned that there's this voice in the main character's head. That voice, it's triggered by nanobots. That's like a whole sci-fi thing, and there's a couple other characters that have it. There's one character where the nanobots are misbehaving, and that character sort of initially was like smacking himself to try to get the nanobots to stop, and I'm like, I don't like that actually. I want to do it different. And like, but I didn't have that realization until like halfway through writing book one, and I'm like, okay, well now I got to go back and change some of this, and that'll be fine. But like, you know, I do feel like that's a little bit of a challenge though with a series, is like once you kind of, especially once you get and release like book one, you really don't want to go and change some of those things in book one, even though if it might make like book three better, you know. So yeah, so far, again, knock on my blockhead, but there's only like a few things that have been smaller, nothing major.
Scott, what about yourself? Have you written anything early into your book one that now as you're working on book two, you're like, oh crap?
Oh man, I'm sure I will have a better answer for you when book 3 comes around. Because the nice thing about a book 2 is like if you ever are like, oh, that's gonna be a really big problem, you're just in the book and there it is, and then it's the book 3 book. So I am so confident that like all the problems that I've created for myself in book 1 are going to be in book 3, not in book 2. But that being said, there's a few things, you know, like I want to say this without spoiling anything, but my series title is The Sound of Silver Strings. And in book 1, it's kind of referenced, and I've got this idea for like the third book, how that's going to be relevant, and it's going to be like, oh wow, yeah. But if that doesn't work out, that's going to be a rough time because I named the series after that. So I'm just hoping, you know, I don't really have a roadmap for my third book yet. So it better work out, you know, or else it's just going to kind of, oh, he named the series after something that didn't really matter, or what, you know, like. So I just want to make sure that I do that. I see that as a problem, and I've got to work towards that for sure.
I am confident that by the time you get there, you will have at least an idea of what to do.
For sure, yeah.
Philip, what about yourself? Is there anything that you established in book 1 that was a little difficult to work around in books 2 or 3? And if so, like, how did you overcome that?
Well, one of the very few advantages to being an idiot who takes 2 decades to write a trilogy is that I got to go back and tweak things a lot. So I have things that, you know, occur in book 1 that get kind of recontextualized in book 3, but that's all deliberate. That's like me being able to go back and say, okay, I'm gonna add this chapter here and do this, then it'll look like it was brilliant planning this all out. And really, it was just I had the advantage of taking so long to write this trilogy, and I had all 3 books done. But I do have an example actually. When I started working with my developmental editor, and he got to the end of book 1 where I killed off a pretty important character, because I thought it would be cool to end the book with a major character, important death. Maybe I was trying to do something like George R.R. Martin or something, and you know, he said to me, this doesn't work. this is not, you don't have a compelling reason for doing this. You need to bring this character back to life. I was like, what? But I already wrote books 2 and 3 and he's not in them. So, what am I supposed to do? But then I thought about it and I realized, actually, I do have a character that I could I had a new character I introduced in book 2. And I immediately realized I could just keep this character alive and give him that arc, that journey. And I realized again that actually there are going to be some really cool moments that are going to happen in books 2 and 3 because this character is still alive. So that was a huge change, and it entailed a lot of revision, and as you can imagine, but less than I thought it was going to be initially, and the payoff was tremendous because my development editor was right. It didn't make sense just to be mean to this character for the sake of showing, hey, I can kill off characters like George R. R. Martin, And actually, it made the story richer, made the story much better, more emotionally resonant, gave it some really wonderful emotional moments in books 2 and especially books 3.
Do you think maybe Tolkien got the exact same advice and that's why we got Gandalf the White?
Maybe.
Ooh, shots fired.
Nah. It worked.
It most definitely did. I did have one more question that I wanted to ask everybody. And Scott, I will start with you on this one. If you could go back to the beginning of your writing journey and give yourself one piece of advice before you started this series, what would it be?
Oh, man. Watch.
That's it right there.
Watch.
Oh, man.
There's so many. Okay. Just no more. Like 16. I was started when I was 16. And I just didn't know anything about anything at that point. I literally started writing my book because I was obsessed with like Skyrim, and I liked the movie Lord of the Rings. I really hadn't even read that much. I liked Percy Jackson and the Olympians. That was cool. And so but know more about storytelling and why things matter. Get your tropes down. Know more about basically consume writing advice, videos and books like most people consume listening to music or watching sports. That's what I did instead. I always had some kind of writing, Closer Look or Hello Future Me. I always had writing advice videos going, and by year 14, I finally figured out what I was doing whenever I was trying to craft these stories. And then also, if you're writing fantasy, you got to learn about history, especially medieval fantasy. I should say, but learning about history, and even it's not just medieval history. I forget the name of the genre, with flintlock and the gear. What's it called? It's not punk. It's something punk.
Like
What's the
steampunk?
genre? Say it again. Steampunk. There we go. Steampunk. Steampunk is supposed to take place in the late 1800s. If you're doing steampunk, you should know everything that happened in the late 1800s and leading up to that. So knowing about history and knowing about storytelling. Wait to write that first word until you've got at least a good starting place in those two areas.
Solid advice. Philip, what would you go back and tell yourself before you started The Way of a Dan?
Well, I like everything Scott said. Maybe I'll just add one little thing, which is there's a Welsh proverb that says it's steady tapping that breaks the stone. So you just do a little bit at a time. You're not going to write that. In my case, it took 2 decades to produce it to the point where I felt like it was publishable. So, and embrace that. Embrace every little step of the way and try to enjoy it. Try to enjoy the learning you're going to do in the process. But yeah, just one little step at a time, and embrace each of them because they're all part of the journey. So be in that moment, in that particular point in the journey where you are. Take it all in, enjoy it.
And Nicholas, round us off. What would you go back and tell yourself before you started your series?
So I love both of their points, Scott's point and Philip's point. Kind of building on those 2 points, I'd also say, like, give myself and advice for any writer, like, give yourself some grace too. Like, it's okay that maybe you haven't watched or listened to every single episode of Writing Excuses that there is available. Like, cool. There's a lot of seasons now. There's a lot of episodes. Like, it's okay. Like, but you do the work. And kind of to Philip's point, you do the work, and you keep at it and you keep at it. Give yourself grace with that. The advice that I would give myself too is not necessarily like series specific, but it is like specific to my experience with writing this series. And it's have a target audience in mind that and have beta readers that are at least like if they're not exactly that target audience, at least they're reading the same things that target audience is, because I did feel like I got some feedback at some points, which was great feedback, but from writers and readers that were not reading the sort of thing that I was writing, and now they've read more of the sort of stuff that I'm trying to write. And now I feel like their feedback is better because it's more, they understand what I'm trying to do, so that I think is something that's helpful and something that maybe I wish I had known a few years ago when I started this one.
No, that's very fair. All of that is very helpful advice. Why don't we go around the horn again, tell the people where they can find us on the internet and where they can find our books. Nicholas, why don't you take us away again?
Cool. Yeah, so I've got a show where I do something similar to this. I've had Michael on. It's called Nerdy Nebula Podcast, and you can check it out on YouTube. So that's number one. Also, would love for you to check out my writing. Best place for that is my website, nicholaswfuller.com, and you can get links to, of course, my social media, our Nerdy Nebula Podcast, but also my Patreon, where I'm serializing Stranded, and you can check out Shattered there also. Man, it felt so clever to have all S-name titles at one point, but like I keep messing them up. Yeah. Shattered's on Patreon, Stranded's available and complete. Check them both out. Thanks.
Excellent. Scott, where can we find you? Where can people find your books?
Well, man, I definitely should have gone first because he was so prepared with all those links and stuff, and I'm just sitting here like, I have an Instagram. I have like one video on my TikTok, maybe. But yeah, follow me on Instagram. It's Scott Caleb Author. My PayHip is up there, so you can purchase my book there. It's a signed copy. I'm also on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and most like major retailers. So if you want to buy my book there, that'd be fantastic.
So you did great. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Oh, and also because of you, I'm going to the Dallas Horror Lit Fest. So I will. If you're in the Dallas area, I'll be there. Come say hi. We'll talk about dragons, and I can ramble and forget more about what I was talking about.
Sounds like a perfect time.
Yeah.
Philip, where can people find you? Where can they find your books?
So I have this YouTube channel called Philip Chase. I think the best of fantasy, which is was started out as an inside joke, but that's what people know my channel as now. And the books are their social media. I'm Philip Chase 90 on Blue Sky and X and Instagram. So I'm there. I'm not on TikTok. I feel like I'm a grandpa, so I don't know. I don't know if I would quite jive with TikTok or I don't know, but anyway. And then the books are available. The physical books you can get really from any online bookseller, and the ebooks Amazon, and the audiobooks are Audible, and the special edition you'd have to go to. This is a TBB press edition, so you'd have to go there through the broken binding for the special edition. So yeah.
And most excellent. Thank you all for coming on to the show today and being gracious guests for my very first panel. Really appreciate it, folks.
Michael, where can people see your book and stuff?
Yeah.
Me?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
people can find me over across all the socials, even TikTok, even though I feel too old to be there too.
I'm
with
30 and I feel
Michael
too old.
_Vadney. I know. And then you can find Crownfall pretty much at michaelvadney.com, Amazon, and some stores, but mostly Amazon and my website. Folks, really appreciate you all being here. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, let's be author adjacent together. See you, folks. Excellent. You all did excellent.